So now that we've talked about using some of the standard brushes located in the brush menu and talked about some of the options for different smoothing and masking abilities inside of ZBrush, let's talk about one more function of sculpting, which is using the transpose tools. So here I just have my model loaded in. It was actually generated through that procedural process of polygroups, and then I just went through with some of the standard brushes and started sculpting a little more of the form to match my reference images here that were loaded through Spotlight. Now, if I come into the model and just kind of frame it here to the front, I'm going to turn off perspective really quick. The transpose options are generally used to kind of move geometry around in your scene. These can be accessed up here through the move, scale, and rotate features on the top, and each one of these keys are bound to a hotkey. So move is W, scale is E, and rotate is R. So now to quickly go into transpose, I'm just going to hit W. And you'll notice as soon as you hit it, you're going to get this kind of gizmo on your model somewhere. If you have symmetry turned on, you're actually going to get something like this where you have symmetrical transpose lines. So I'm just going to hit X to turn off symmetry, so I just have one on my screen at this time. Now the functionality of transpose is that basically you can draw a transpose line from where you start to where you end your stroke. So if I start here and draw and release, it's going to give me a transpose line like that. The transpose line also allows for shift functionality where it will actually adhere to an angle or a straight line. So if I draw here and then while dragging out hold shift, it's going to snap to the canvas and give me a nice straight transpose line like so. You can also snap to angles, so this is still just holding shift, and I can get my transpose line to snap at certain angles around my model. So this allows you to move things on your model in space at a perfectly horizontal or vertical axis if needed. Other functionality of the actual transpose line is if you hover over it, you'll see you have an outer circle and an inner circle on each point of the line. The outer circle allows you to adjust the transpose line after you've drawn it. So if I come over and just hover over the outer circle and click and move, I can adjust that transpose line to change the scale of it like so. And you can do that on both ends, so just taking it and doing it, and you're going to end up moving that transpose line after you've drawn it. Now the inner outer circle, this one here, is going to move that whole line. So if you drew it and you want to actually move it up here now, closer to the top of this visor, you just click that outer circle and drag, and you can move that entire transpose line like so. Some other interesting things about the transpose line is you have these kind of areas here on the sides, and these are going to allow you to shift that transpose line to another angle. So right now I have it going horizontal, but if I want this transpose line to go vertical, I can just come here and click one of those circles, and it's going to give that transpose line translated into that axis. So this is a quick way to kind of change the actual orientation of your transpose line as you're using it. Another thing to note is this white circle right here. And this white circle is extremely beneficial if you want to draw straight lines on your model. So if you want to come in and say draw a straight line from here to here, if you're going to do it normally, you'd go back to your draw option, and then let's get the standard brush here, and you try to just draw a straight line. So you come up here and you just kind of draw a straight line. So that's pretty straight, but it's not as perfect as it could be. Well, if we go back to this transpose line here and we just draw the actual line where we want it to go, so I want that line to follow this precise angle of that transpose line, and then you come down here and you click this circle, it's going to take your model and rotate it to make sure that this line here is perfectly horizontal across the canvas. It's not going to do anything to your model, it's all screen based actually in the canvas. So if you click it, you can now see it's taken that transpose line and generated it completely horizontally on my model. So now if I go back to draw and start drawing this here and hold shift, it's going to give me a perfectly straight line. And so the transpose was just there to pretty much set up that angle and then allow me to quickly come in and draw that straight line. So you can do this anywhere on your model, so it's really handy if you want to draw, like, straight lines from here to here and you want to be absolutely perfectly straight. Just click that white thing, it's going to shift the model to that angle, and then I go now to the draw mode and just draw that line and that holding shift, and that's going to give me a perfectly straight line. So another cool little trick with transpose. Going back to just the defaults of the transpose here, so you just draw them out like normal, and now we're going to talk about these inner circles through the form here. So the inner middle circle is the main one that you use pretty much with the move transpose line. So if I wanted to reposition this visor out a little bit more, I can draw a transpose line out holding shift and then coming to this center circle and just clicking and holding, and it's going to allow me to move that part. Now if I want that part to snap to a perfectly horizontal angle while I'm moving it, just hold shift and you can see it pop into place, and then now it's a perfectly horizontal movement across that model. So this is a quick way to kind of move things as you're working on them with the transpose lines. And then you just draw another one and move and offset, and it's pretty fast to kind of go through and move parts on your actual model. So now with the move transpose line, there's another kind of functionality you can do with it without touching any of the transpose. You just need to have it active on the model. So if I just have it active, just move turned on, if I go to any part of that subtool that is selected and hold down Alt and then click and move, it's going to give me a screen space move on that port of the model. So this is really nice for kind of just doing quick moves on things or nudges. So I can just come to a certain angle like the front view here and hold Alt while being active in the move transpose line and then just move that part around. So if you need to just come in and do quick kind of adjustments to things, you can do it really quick with just that screen space or canvas space movement. Now going back to the actual move thing, we're now going to start talking about the other options in the move, or the more advanced features of the transpose line. So we talked about symmetry starting off, so if I hit X, I can get that symmetrical transpose line. And now I can come to this inner circle and start moving, and you can see it's actually going to start deforming my geometry like so. So with this process, you can kind of get some interesting shapes or forms generated by simply just having symmetry on and using that inner circle transpose move to kind of deform the mesh. Now if I turn on the polyframes here, you can see it's actually skewing a lot of my geometry when I actually do that function. But if you're using a Dynamesh mesh, or you're going to re-Dynamesh it, as soon as you run Dynamesh again, it's going to re-tessellate that area in there and give you a nice distribution of polygons through there. So this is a quick way to kind of deform the surface of your model and then re-Dynamesh, and you're going to get all that nice resolution back again, so you can go in there and continue sculpting. Another thing with the actual move functions are the center circle on the bottom and the center circle on the top. The bottom one by default, if you click it, will just kind of do a scale kind of move process, so you can kind of get interesting shapes like so out of that, and it'll just allow you to kind of free form control that object. Now this is not really good for a rotation purpose because it is distorting the actual geo, so you can see it's actually stretching and skewing it, but it's good for a lot of things. Cylinders, it works really well to make cylinders longer. You can just go through and grab this point and just extend the surface of that cylinder out. Another cool one is the actual start inner circle, which is up here, and this is actually going to do almost like a clip process. So if I come here and click this, you can see it's actually kind of clipping the geometry. So this allows me to kind of come through and make interesting changes on the model like so. So if I want the visor to be like that length now, or maybe that's still too long, let's come back and make it a little bit shorter. You can do that really quick with just transpose and not using any other brush. And it's not just dependent to objects like that. Like if I come to the side panel here and draw this out and then grab that start line there, I can actually start tailoring all sorts of different parts with just that move transpose line. Now another part of the transpose line that's pretty awesome is if you go to the inner circle and you hold Alt and click the inner circle, you get this kind of effect of like almost an inflate kind of taper effect. So you can come through and just draw transpose lines all over the place, and then just hold Alt and click that inner circle, and you actually start skewing the geometry some like this. And you can start getting some interesting shapes out of this method, which is drawing these things out and holding Alt. Get some like interesting ridges going on the different surfaces of your model. It is distorting the geometry, as you can see, but as we mentioned, with a Dynameshed object, you can come back in and pretty much fix all this stuff up pretty quick. So it's a great way to kind of go in and kind of conceptual sculpt on different elements of the model with this actual move and transpose lines. So you get some really cool shapes out of that. So before moving on to the scale and rotate transpose line options, I want to cover two more topics on the move transpose line. So I have symmetry turned on. I'm just going to turn off with X, and I'm just going to rotate my model and just draw a transpose line out. Now the transpose line here, the move one, has a functionality that can actually duplicate model geometry that you have in a subtool. So you can do almost like extract functions through the transpose line. To get this to work, you need to make sure that you have no subdivisions on your model. So over in the geometry tab here, you can see I have no subdivisions on it. And then you just need to draw a transpose line out, and you need to make sure you have no masking associated with the model. So just clear your masks by just holding Control and clicking off. And then you want to come and hold Control and then click this middle circle here. And so as you hold Control and click and move this, it's going to actually duplicate that piece of geometry on your model. So you can kind of continue through now and just kind of duplicate those portions out. So if I really wanted to have this large kind of spinal surface, just Control and click, and you can kind of start multiplying these elements on your model. Now when you start doing this, you should probably be aware of the polygon count of your actual model, because if you're dealing with really high subdivided or really high tessellated geometry, when you start multiplying this, your poly count is going to get really high on that one subtool. So just be wary when you start multiplying stuff with the move transpose line. So now I'm just going to undo that spinal thing there and get back here. Now I'm going to talk about the final thing I'm going to cover with the actual move transpose, and that is using the transpose line to generate masking. So to do this, you just need to hold Control on your model and then draw a transpose line out, and you're going to notice that it's going to generate a mask in the distance or the relation in which you draw that transpose line out. So this is a quick way to come through your model and just hold Control and mask out certain portions of it. It works really well for objects such as arms or things that are very cylindrical. You can quickly just mask out a portion of it and then go in and apply bends and all sorts of things like that to kind of deform your model further. But that's just a really quick way to kind of do masking with just using the move transpose line and holding Control and dragging the transpose line out. So now on to the scale transpose line. So the scale transpose line actually functions, pretty much the same as the actual move one. So it's the same functionality, the general functionality of rotating around and repositioning things as needed. The main thing for scale is if you draw it out like so, you then come to either the inner circle at the start or the inner circle at the bottom and just click and drag, and it's going to scale that part of your model up. Now when you're scaling pieces like this, you can see it's kind of offsetting that scale, so it's scaling it up, but it's also scaling it up based on where the position of the transpose line was. So if you want to scale up something globally, turn symmetry on, and now when you do that scale, it should scale it evenly across both sides. There's another functionality of the transpose line, which is this inner circle here, and this is going to allow you to do a non-kind of uniform scale based on the direction of which this transpose line is drawn. So if I come here and scale with the transpose line like this, it's going to actually distort in a vertical fashion, and then if I draw the transpose line like this and run that scale, it's going to scale in a horizontal fashion. So just determining where that transpose line is and then how to actually scale of it is going to change the functionality that the transpose line will generate when you do that process. Another few other things with the actual scale transpose line is if we hold Alt and do this bottom drag here, it's just going to do a uneven scale off the bottom. So this is good for tapering pieces. So if you want something to be tapered in or tapered out, you can just come over to the extent of the bottom transpose line and hold Alt, and it'll do it like that. And then the opposite side will do the opposite, so it'll scale up the other end there, so you can give crazy sort of helmet designs pretty quick like that. The inner circle does a very similar functionality to the actual move transpose line, but it does it with scale rather than move. So if I hold Alt and click here, you're going to see it's going to scale that intersection like so. So I can come over to this piece here, draw that little line out, and then scale, and it'll just scale that little area in there. So you can kind of come through on different parts of your model and tapered certain things like that, just using those transpose lines, and get very cool kind of interesting shapes out of it. And that's the basic stuff for the actual scale transpose line. So now let's talk about the rotate transpose line. So this transpose line has similar functionality to the move, so it has quite a few options as well. The main principle for this is if you have a part of your model selected, you just drag it out, and then when you actually either pick this side or this side's inner circle and rotate, you're actually going to rotate that part of your model. Now this rotation can also snap, so if you hold Shift, it will actually snap to an angle, but this gives you the kind of freedom to kind of rotate different parts across the surface of your model. Now the middle structure here will do a rotate based on the angle in which that transpose line is, so similar to that scale kind of functionality. So if you draw it here, it's actually going to rotate along this axis, and so it's going to give you a rotational functionality like that. And then if you draw it horizontally and rotate off that middle circle, you're going to get a transitional property like this. So very similar to the kind of how the scale was working with the non-uniform functionality. Now the other processes the rotate has is it has those alt functions as well. So if I draw a transpose line out across a surface like this works really well for like legs. And I hold alt and rotate this, it's just going to bend that inner part. So it's just leaving those two endpoints and then rotating that center section. So that's just holding alt and moving that center zone there. So that's pretty good for getting twists and legs and things like that. The other alt functionality that's also good for cylindrical objects for bending them is if we just hold alt and then grab one of the circles here, it's going to bend off this circle. So think of this as like almost a bone structure. So you'd have your knee joint and then you'd have your ankle joint, and when you hold alt and click the structure here, it's going to bend it like an ankle. So you can see here it's kind of constraining that structure there, and you can do it both ways. Just hold alt and then click that inner circle, and you can actually start rotating these pieces out. So you can get these kind of interesting kind of bend shapes as you go across your model. Now this does distort the model quite a bit, so once again, since it's a dynameshed object or can be dynameshed, you can just re-dynamesh it, and it's going to get that topology all nice and clean, and then you can continue sculpting. So I'm just going to undo that there. Now one final little thing with the actual rotate transpose line is if we come back and just select this part of the model here, is that all the transpose lines have the ability to snap to a normal, or the facing normal that you actually click on. So if I wanted to run a transpose line right out of this kind of plate here on the cheek area, you just come here and click, and it's going to generate a transpose line straight off that normal. And so what this allows you to do is to come through and find certain areas on your model that you want to rotate from, and you can just establish it really quick with one click and then just rotate, and it's going to actually rotate or deform off that actual position. So if for some reason I wanted to rotate 100% from this area here, I can click there, so it's going to give me that transpose line straight off. And then if I wanted to rotate it so it's actually going this way, you can come over and just select one of these angles that's actually going to give you a vertical alignment of that transpose line, and now I can hold that alt button, and now I'm getting a rotation right off that center point where I picked originally. That's another way to get kind of joints and stuff established really quick, and then rotate and bend off specific points of your model. Well, that's the basic premise on the transpose line kind of tools to go through and actually start sculpting on your model. We'll use them a little bit more as we continue working on sculpting a helmet.